Welcome to What's in Store with Carly and Chris, the show where we cover hot topics at the cross section of retail and real estate. I'm Carly Iacono, and I'm joined by my co-host Chris Ressa. Chris, great to see you. How's life?
Life is good. How are you?
I am rocking and rolling. It's back to school season. We're back in the office on Fridays. I mean, summer fun is over. How about you?
Same, but I am excited to have the household in routine.
Definitely
I
easier. I
I
agree.
summer routine like goes away. It's like hard to be in routine. Things are very different. I like the concept that the household is in routine.
Okay, so you have structure to your days. Good. Glad to
Yes.
hear it. I agree. That
Structure
is
to the household days.
okay.
I think that impacts
Back in green.
everything.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. It's a few weeks to figure out the structure, but once it's in place and things are
Touche.
rolling, I agree. It gets a little bit easier. So I'm sure we're all going through the same thing beginning of the year.
Yeah.
So today's episode is going to be an interesting one. We are talking about three categories that are pretty hotly debated right now in the net lease sector, and that is banks, drugstores, and theaters. So we're going to go through our thoughts on why these are not necessarily as challenged as most people think and bring up some points that are just not as widely talked about in all of the media. So I'm excited. You ready
Me
to go?
too. Yes.
Awesome. Let's do it. So we're going to start with banks. And I'm just going to throw it out there to set the stage for those of you who don't realize this trend. Banks are opening more locations than they are closing. I mean, that's it, right? Do we even need to say anything else? No, of course we do. I'm kidding. But that's the framework, right? There's been so much time in the last years that we've been saying, gosh, why do we have bank branches? They don't need to exist. They're all going to disappear. Everything's online. And we have proven that that is just frankly not the case. So, why don't you kick us off with your initial thoughts on why banks are an interesting category and why they're opening more locations than they're closing?
Yeah, we're doing bank deals, leasing space in our centers. We've done a as recently as this year, and I think it's super fascinating. And the thing I think is most fascinating about a lot of real estate categories, including office. You're in your company's office. I'm in my company's office right now. Is that I think we've come to the place where we need to optimize real estate, but we have also come to a place where we have realized that real estate for just about most businesses is a need and not a want. And there's headline news about offices are going away. There used to be about banks going away and this going away. I think the answer is like there are very few categories, very few business things that don't need some level of real estate. Do people need to optimize their real estate more efficiently to get better productivity in the office sector, to get better cost savings, to get better, revenue from a retail sector? Sure. But that doesn't mean they don't need real estate. They need to optimize it.
We very much live in a bricks and mortar society, right? Our whole lives are not digital. We don't live in this electronic world all the time. Of course, that's an important piece, but there are touch points in the world that remain extremely important. Office, physical retail, all of that is just, fabric of our day-to-day life, like it or not. Hopefully most people like it. So I think that's a great point that, this is still a relevant consumer touch point. I think taking that one step further, one thing we've talked about in a lot of our episodes regarding other retailers is the cost of customer acquisition online. It's really, really difficult, very expensive. And I think that's even more so the case for banks, right? Would you agree that they need the physical locations to have that interaction with their existing consumers and customers and then to attract future customers in a real environment.
I think that's so true. Or, I think, especially when you're talking about people's money, I think a lot of the smart banks want to build a relationship with their consumer. And I think that's hard to do online. And the cost of customer acquisition, I think is even higher than we might think, right? Like, we often get these ads like free $400 if you open a checking account and get direct deposit started in this new bank and whatnot. And I think, you know, that's that's costly. That's first they had to do the ad, pay for the ad, then they have this significant offer of real money going back to you. To me, I think, this speaks to how important physical presence is when you're seeing things like that.
Completely agree. And I think if you take it a step further, there's an opportunity when you have that physical presence to expand the product offering, right? Traditional retail does this all the time. You go into a store for one thing, you end up with 20 others, right? Because of good product placement and enticing offerings. Same thing with a bank, although in a different vertical. You go in to do your checking, and then maybe you have a relationship and someone's asking you about wealth management or retirement, all these other services that are high trust services and are very difficult to build that relationship, to your point, online. So I think that's a really important piece of the overall strategy is adding on these ancillary services or additional income streams for the bank that they wouldn't be as successful if they didn't have that location.
100%. I think, we've come to this point and banks have spent a lot of money trying to realizing this, that and researching this, I guess I should say, that the not having a bank presence is not nearly as is much more effective. It's much more effective to have a bank physical presence to acquiring new and keeping existing customers than it is to not have a physical presence. I think, and this is proven by the number of bank branches that are starting to be open. We had closed a lot of branches, and clearly we took it a bridge too far, and now they're starting to grow again.
And I think there's, obviously truth that every location does not need to exist, that there still be some closures, but that's with any sort of real estate, right? There, if it's an underperforming location, maybe the deposits are low, maybe the demographics are thin, or you've had some shifts in population density, that's going to factor into whether that's a long-term successful location or not. So I think we would be remiss to not mention that, yes, some branches are still closing with the optimization of real estate, and that would be expected. But the trend has shifted. And that's really the interesting point here that I think Chase is a perfect example of this. They're opening significantly more branches than they're closing because they're seeing the long term opportunity.
Nailed it.
The last thing I want to mention on this before we move on, and this was something that you had brought up in one of our earlier discussions, and that was the difficulty of banks in particular to grow organically because of regulations, right? We see
Inorganically.
inorganically. Thank you. We see a lot of mergers and acquisitions and all the other verticals, but that's much more difficult because of regulations in the bank space. So I just wanted to highlight that because you had mentioned it previously that there is unique challenges to growing through mergers and acquisitions for this space. So the physical presence and organic growth is even more important.
For sure.
Excellent. All right, let's move on to our next category, which is drugstores. Now, this one has been in the news quite a bit with the Rite Aid bankruptcy and then some shifts in strategy with CVS and Walgreens. It's just definitely hotly discussed, let's say. Um, but I know you and I believe you and I share a similar perspective that this is not a category that is disappearing, right? Like so many of the headlines, I think that is very overinflated. It's certainly having a period of change overall, but we still need physical drugstores. Why don't you tell us your perspective?
Mine is simple. Like, It's great real estate. They have great real estate. It's not a real estate issue. Not only that, most consumers still want and do physically go to a drugstore to get drugs, to get medicine. So the reality is this is not a real estate issue, and this is not a consumer challenge that some of these groups are going through. What this is about is the real challenge of the the structure in which they're paid. The drugstores are paid, through our healthcare system from the insurance companies and the benefit managers. And so at the end of the day, there's obviously going to be some optimization, but in a place where consumers want and need to physically go to get medicine at a drugstore, and drugstores have great real estate, I don't think this is going away. And listen, they're still opening up locations. There's still all the M&A that's happened in this space, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
significant.
the Walgreens and Rite Aid, they were getting more locations by going through things, right? Not less locations. And
Mhm.
so groups thought they needed more physical presence in order to, grow the business. I think the reality is the landscape of how a drugstore profits from selling pharmaceuticals is super complicated, super messy, and is evolving. And that's putting pressure on the store's P&L. I
Right.
think, I think, you know, so I start with the basics of it's great real estate, and people want to go to that great real estate to pick up the product and buy
Right.
the product. So that's different than Blockbuster.
Right.
Blockbuster had great real estate, but nobody needed or wanted the product anymore because it moved,
Right.
right? The product evaporated. There was no, do you have a VCR?
Of course not.
Right?
No.
I don't
Yeah.
see us getting to a place where we don't need medicine.
Right. And you have that
And,
trust factor too, right?
you
People
know,
want to go in and pick up the medicine directly from the pharmacy. There's a bit of apprehension about having it shipped through the mail, even if it is from a national company.
I ask a million questions when I go to the pharmacy. I ask the pharmacist, I'm like, I want to know
I
what's,
bet they love you. They're like, "Here
I
he is
ask them,
again."
I ask them, hopefully I'm not going in that often, that they know who I am by name, but when I go and I get something, I ask a million questions. I'm getting antibiotics. I want to know, I ask the
Right.
pharmacy people about the antibiotics, and I feel better when they're telling me than if I'm reading it online. So again, people want and need the product. They want and need to go to the store to get the product, and the product is located in very convenient, awesome real estate. To me, that's the start of fundamental success.
And then you have the question of what needs to change then to make the stores more profitable. One trend that thought was very interesting is the move towards more private label products. Is if what you're selling is being squeezed on margins, but you can have the same product under your private label brand for a much higher margin, and the consumer doesn't seem to care in a lot of categories, whether it's private label or main brand. Why not go that way? So I've seen a big push with, I think, both CVS and Walgreens boosting their private label offerings in an effort to make the front of the store more profitable. I thought that was an interesting trend.
For sure. I think for me, like in dispelling like any myths out there, I think it's really about like if you went to the general consumer on the street, why have you seen some pharmacies close? And I think the common response would be like, oh, people are buying more pharmaceutical drugs online. And that's just not why that's happening.
Right.
And
That's
to
a
me,
very small percentage
that's a
still.
very small percentage of people buy pharmaceutical drugs online. It's very small. Most
Hmm.
people need and want to go to the store. And
Right.
we're not, as Americans, we're not taking less medicine than we were 30 years ago.
Right.
So we need more medicine. Majority still going to the store. And so my point is, it's not about the real estate and it's not about people's desire to change channel to purchase. And that's what it gets lumped into. Any challenges in the space gets lumped into that. And that's where when I was talking to you, it was like that earlier, that's my point, is like the why matters, I think. And the why has more to do with our healthcare system than it does to do about people's buying habits and the real estate. That's not what
Mhm.
any of these closures are really about.
Right. Now, we have seen some testing of different formats. I'm sure you're familiar with the Walgreens Mini Cooper. They're very small format stores. I know they're opening, I think it's 100 next year of that new format. So I believe we might see a shift in square footage, but I don't think the front of the store is irrelevant. I think that is still a profit center. And we may find that the Mini Cooper is too small. Maybe it's somewhere in between. I think that's what they're solving for. It's not, do we need these physical locations and are drug scores going to disappear? It's, how do we rework the space we have to make it as profitable as possible? And that's what's, in my mind, up for discussion right now.
Do you do you make any trips to the pharmacy intentionally to buy something that is not from the actual pharmacy itself?
Yes.
Me too, all the time.
Mhm.
They're
Yep.
super conveniently located stores.
Exactly.
And I do all the time, right? Like the one that comes to mind the most is and outside of over the counter medicine too, right? That's not in the pharmacy. So obviously over the counter medicine, and band-aids and things like that.
Right.
But greeting cards, like that's my
Yes.
go-to for greeting cards. Every
You're exactly
holiday,
right.
birthday, I
Mhm.
I'm and I feel like there's that like monthly.
Right.
So I'm in there buying greeting cards all the time.
That are $8 each now. So there's gotta be some profitability in that, but where else are you going to buy those? You have to go there for all the birthday parties and so forth. No, that's a perfect example. And then the
Right?
random items that, the kids forgot they were out of and need immediately, and, there's always something. So,
Immediately.
immediately, yeah.
Yeah.
But in
I
panic mode.
I do have a question because this was a huge trend. Do you use the drive-through at the pharmacy?
My current pharmacy does not have one, so no.
Okay. Mine does. We don't. I don't know why. But that's probably good for them because then I'm more apt to buy other product,
Right?
right? But I mean, like all most of our hygiene products come from the pharmacy,
Mhm.
So there's a lot of stuff.
All right, so they're going to continue to exist. We just need to work on some of the issues in the American healthcare system, which is far-reaching and complex, but we
It
know the real
is.
estate matters. Yeah. Yeah. It's very straightforward.
Yeah.
Everybody loves health insurance. It's great. It's a great system. Please. That's another episode out of
Yeah.
our realm, thank God. All right, let's go on to our third category, which has been, again, very hotly discussed, but for completely different reasons, and that is movie theaters. What a ride the last 4 years have been for movie theaters. So I'm just going to lay the stage on this one. And we were reading, I'm going to give you the exact stat because it's crazy. This is from Statista, that it is a $79.2 billion industry in 2024. And they're projecting an annual growth rate, now not decline, growth rate of 5.68% per year. So I don't know. I mean, just data wise, right? That kind of puts the
So
kibosh on no one's going to the theaters.
so I think that is easily dispelled. I think this issue is again structure. So if we look at Barbenheimer from last year,
Right.
what is clear that Americans want are Americans love the theatrical experience, and Americans love when there's a big blockbuster mega film to go see in the theatrical experience. And I think the challenge that the theater industry faces is when there are all these things that happen in Hollywood that disrupt the flow of product getting into the theaters. Again,
Right.
typically these are regionally located in places that are convenient to get to. The theaters have done a great job in renovating the real estate, and Americans, just look at Barbenheimer, want to go to the theaters and experience the theatrical experience. My kids, they're young, 6 and 7, love the movie theater, love it. They love going to the movie theater. Um, but there has to be the right product in the theater. And I think they don't, there's a less control, right? It's hard for them to go to private label,
Of course. Right.
right? It's hard for them to go to private label. So I think the reality is that, you know, they're really, really subject to what's happening in Hollywood. And that causes these ebbs and flows. But if we've
Mm.
learned anything from what's happened is that people want a reason. We got to give them a reason. They want a reason to go to the theater.
What do you think about the price point? Just a little bit of a challenge here on your perspective. Do you think we are close to a tipping point where the price of the tickets, which are $20, $23 in some theaters if you want reserved seats per ticket, do you think we're close to a tipping point where that doesn't become the Friday, Saturday night go to for Americans? Because if you multiply that out with a family of 4 or 5, you add in popcorn, you add in just basics, that's a big night out now, which, might be out of reach for some.
So my initial gut reaction is compared to what we're doing the movies versus what instead of the movies, what would we do
Staying
instead?
home, watch the movie, watch a different movie on TV, not go out, right?
So, but if I
Maybe go
want the
bowling. I don't know.
experience of going out, okay, you mentioned going bowling. If I want the experience of going out and entertaining, I think compared to other venues, it's still on the lower side of the entertainment realm,
Okay. So you're not
right?
comparing it to staying home and streaming a movie. You're saying we're
No.
going to go out. So are we going to Topgolf? Are we going to a movie theater? Are we going out to a nice dinner? What form of entertainment
So
is the family
it's a family.
consuming?
If the family's going out, right? Right.
Mhm.
We decide we got to get out of the house. We're going to go somewhere. It's the theater. It's the trampoline park. It's
Mhm.
bowling. And none of those are like wildly less expensive than going to theater, right? It's going to the Yankee game. You want
Mhm.
expensive, go
Right.
to a sports game.
The different category. Yeah. Different
So,
level.
but is it though? It's going out and entertaining,
Yeah. Okay.
right?
Okay.
I don't think I don't think streaming and going to the movies are comparable in the sense that we want to make them comparable. It's either right. I'm doing the same thing. That's like saying, to me, that's like saying, I'm going to run at home instead of going to the gym.
Okay. You don't think that's valid?
I
I
think
do
most
make that
people,
calculation in my head all the time.
I think most people are going, most people want to have a gym membership who are interested in having a healthier lifestyle. That's why their gyms are so
Mm.
successful that as they are.
Even if they could run at home, which obviously they can run outside. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. I like
Why,
this
why, why,
perspective.
why are treadmills? When someone from the theater industry came into our offices and did a presentation before,
Mm.
and they were not trying to compete with the person who doesn't want to go out and spend money. What they had on the screen as competition was going to the sporting game, going to the trampoline park, going bowling, going to Top Golf. These were the competition venues plus other theaters, not someone who's sitting home. I think when we make that comparison, we're like really missing how the family dynamic works. We're not deciding of because most times the movie in the theater isn't home.
Right.
It's about going out and being entertained.
So you don't think we're close to a tipping point, even if you're just comparing it to other entertainment. You think there's more room to run and the $20, $25 ticket is going to be absorbed And in fact, maybe theaters could spend more on renovations, good food, drinks. There's a lot of different theater concepts out there and still have a runway.
I think the price of entertaining generally has gotten high.
Right.
And I think people are making a decision of, do I have the ability to afford to be entertained this weekend versus not? I don't think it's unique to theaters. I think entertainment in America has costs a lot of money. And I think that in general, that's the distinction.
Hmm.
Less about specific to movie theaters, because on a comparative basis, I think you would see they fall. Like, I don't know, if I go bowling with my family, my wallet's not any more full than if I go to the theaters.
Right. That's true. And there's a lot of high end bowling concepts, to stick with that idea. So,
Yeah. So I
okay.
think it's
I like
about like,
this.
can you afford to be entertained or not?
Hmm.
It's no difference than it's the same distinction. Like, can I afford to go out to eat, or do I need to make dinner at home? Or maybe
Right.
I've already made the distinction. We're not cooking, but can I afford to have it delivered, or do I need to go pick it up because it costs so much to have it delivered?
Right. So, do you think by that line of reasoning that we will see, I guess, more elaborate theater concepts, like I was mentioning, more food options, not just popcorn, the drinks? Do you think we're going to go that way in the industry and have it be more of a full experience? Or do you think it'll start to segment kind of like the gym industry does with your budget options, your lifetime luxury options, and they're kind of going to target different consumer verticals?
I am not uh Nostradamus, so I don't know. But
What?
I would
You
say,
always have an opinion. Come on.
my thought, I think it's more likely that it gets segmented than not.
Right.
I think it's already kind of there. It might get further segmentation, but I think there is a lot of opportunity to have affordable entertainment for Americans. And I think, there's, yeah, there's opportunity in doing that.
I think this was great. I love all these kind of contrarian, but very truthful, realistic viewpoints that we ran through today on categories that have been unfairly negatively talked about, in my
That's right.
opinion.
Me too.
Yeah, really, really good information. Chris, always a pleasure. Thanks so
Same.
much. And to everyone listening, that was another episode of What's in Store with Carly and Chris. We really appreciate you tuning in, and we hope to see you very soon. Have a great day, everyone.